Maybe you're like me, and your sense of time is not linear. At least not completely. Let me explain. A lot of people, maybe even the majority of people, think of time as a straight line. They can see the path of their day laid out from the night before. They can look at a clock and know when it's time to get up and when it's time to go to bed. They thrive on routine and have a disciplined way of going about their business. They can structure and plan things accordingly to a daily calendar. It's obviously necessary to think one step ahead when planning or thinking about accomplishing something, but I find myself thinking of things existing in a bubble or sphere of time which surrounds me in all directions. I imagine things and events as being all around me, floating at various depths and in various clusters. I guess you could say I'm a spatial thinker, but really I'm an abstract thinker. I think of things in terms of how they relate to each other, not just in shape or size, but even more so in how events in the past, present, and even future all relate to each other. And for me, it's more important to understand how things and events are related and how I fit into all of it. Sometimes I get lost in these thoughts. Not in a bad way with no way out, but more like one thought leads to another and then another. And the next thing I know, a lot of time goes by. What I'm doing is a form of daydreaming, I get it. But it's not all lofty thoughts of floating away in fantasy. It's more about my thoughts wanting to find meaning in things and then going on a path of openness and creativity. What I'm doing, I realize, is looking for connections in everything. Because now I've come to realize everything is connected. I'll give you an example of what happens to me because I think I relate. I was in a thrift store looking for goodies. Nothing in particular, but one of those times where I'll know it when I see it excursions. I happened upon a very exquisite, well-made coffee mug. It looked like something I imagined in an old tavern. What drew me to it was not just the particular shape, which was bottom-heavy and tapered toward the top, but also the design on the side. I knew it had something to do with Germany. It spoke immediately to the German part of my heritage, so when I picked it up, I was delighted to see it stamped on the bottom with the words, "Made in West Germany." Instantly, I knew I had to have it. Now, here are all the thoughts that swirled through my head as I examined the heft and quality craftsmanship of this mug. I thought of how it reminded me of traveling to Germany, which brought back happy and fun memories. I also, for some reason, thought of the Cold War and how Germany was divided not even all that long ago and how families were separated. I mean, this mug was made in West Germany. It was stamped as such, as if to say, I was made by the hands of a citizen who was doing the best they could to make a living at a time when only a city block away, all or part of their family was trapped behind the Iron Curtain. How unbelievable it felt for me to imagine being separated from your family, your friends, and land by a seemingly arbitrary but deadly arrangement of bricks and cement and guard towers. And I went on to think about what life might have been like at the very moment the mug was stamped and ready for purchase. What was the mood that day? What other items were being set out for sale? Who originally bought this mug? A tourist, probably? And who were they, and what made them want to travel to see West Germany? Obviously, this person passed on or didn't want the mug anymore. After all, it's in a suburban thrift shop in America. Did they use it for beer or coffee? Was it a gift they did not cherish? I have to say the mug was in excellent condition and a very fair price, so of course I bought it. Yes, I know what you're thinking. I was simply fascinated with the history and provenance. You're thinking, okay, he's a history buff. He likes history. There is some historical value or significance to the mug. But what does any of this have to do with taking 10 years to get a 4-year degree? I did travel to Germany some years ago. It was something I'd wanted to do ever since I got back briefly from living in London. I had been bitten by the travel bug and wanted to see and experience more of the world outside of suburban America. But to the point about getting a degree in college. I had a very rough time in high school. I dropped out after spending 2 very harsh years being verbally ridiculed and physically bullied on an almost daily basis. It was my routine at the time. It was only after slogging through the 2nd year that I finally had enough and told my parents, well, insisted really, that there was no way I was going back. Thankfully, they trusted me and allowed me to set myself on the correct path for finishing high school. I enrolled in independent study and found myself on a nice trajectory that corrected the downward spiral I was on for so long. I will discuss all of this in another video, I promise. The point is, when I got my high school diploma, I knew that I was very interested in exploring my creativity. but didn't have the aptitude, patience, or willingness to take an SAT exam to try to get into an expensive four-year university. Instead, I looked into my local community college and found a world of exciting opportunities I hadn't even thought of. Let me pause here and discuss some options. I honestly didn't know that the kinds of classes being offered at this college were things you could study or even major in. I'll remind you, for me, high school was a popularity contest that I was losing, big time. I don't remember learning a lot of things I wanted to know about. You know, when you take biology or Spanish or any of the math classes I so miserably failed at, it's because I had to. We all do. You're told the curriculum, given the books, take the tests, and know that you have to get a 7 or better to pass. You spend the better part of no less than 18 years, that's your whole life, learning how the world works. Well, you're actually enculturated into the way the rest of the world wants you to fit in. Much more on that topic later, I promise. Things were decided long before you came along on what you need to know or what you're supposed to know by the time you're out of high school. But you already know that. That's why you're listening to me. You want to know where this is going. So what do? You play the game. You kind of have to, right? You go to school every day and learn not just about the subjects in books, but in how to act around other people, how we form bonds, make enemies, and deal with problems or not deal with them, and discover so many things on the daily, both about ourselves and about the way things really are. Not the way we think we want them to be, but the way that they actually are. And that becomes tougher as we go through middle school and high school. We gain independence and therefore distance from our families, both physically and emotionally. Tons of stuff happens we're too embarrassed to share with them. And the next thing you know, you're out of high school. So, now what? Well, when I picked up the catalog from the community college, it was like looking at a rainbow of fantastic and totally previously unthought of possibilities. Seriously. I remember flipping through the pages. Yes, it was a thick brochure at the time. There was probably an online version, but this is my story. So, as I flipped through the pages, there were classes being offered on cooking, photography, martial arts, computer sciences, of course, but also things like ceramics, astronomy, scuba diving, and creative writing. I'm telling you, it was a little overwhelming at first, but incredibly exciting. It wasn't high school where I was forced to just learn Spanish or French because that's all that was offered. By the way, I did take classes in both and loved them, but I could now also take classes in Japanese, German, and Italian, and I did, all of them. I could now learn about computer animation and even bowling. Yes, as in throwing a ball at 10 pins, hoping to knock them all down with the skill instead of luck, and of course some bumpers. I mean, the list goes on. But why, you ask? Why did that take you 10 years long to do? What were you doing in the meantime? Did you just repeat your bowling class for 10 years for 100 credits? No, that's not what happened. What happened was life. Life happened. It happened at the pace that I set it. And this is where my story becomes critically important for you to understand and relate to. Like we talked about. Your life, your studies, going to school, becoming a young adult, and your home life, all of it was designed to set you on your own path, for you to find your own lane and get on it and go. But here's where I struggled with it, and it was, and still is, my way of thinking that prevented me, or rather repulsed me from jumping on board with the path set out for me. I'm talking about that linear line of thinking again. I'm talking about the idea of the next step. What is the next step? What is the next logical, preformed step that a person is supposed to take after high school? Now, you've been no doubt told basically one of two things. Move out and get a job, if you don't already have one, or go to college or university, get your degree in something meaningful that will hopefully land you a better job, and then worry about what happens next when you get there. Well, for me, the protest was not in what to do, but in how to go about forming my own decisions, when my entire life, just like yours, your entire life, someone was making decisions for you. But I've made my own decisions for a while now, you're saying to yourself. Have you? It is impossible to not have been heavily influenced by those closest around you, those who you've bonded with by birth and by upbringing. See, whether you like it or not, you've been influenced so much, good or bad by the way, that you've now come to this point where your very existence, your autonomy, that is, your ability to think and move about in a truly independent way, has all been affected by your tribe, those who've brought you up. You've also been under the heavy influence of the media you've ingested for years, your books, your videos, your music, your shows. But also very critically along with that, The years of bombarding commercials and advertisements and influencers that tell you this is how you should live. Now, how is that fair? It's the way of the world. It's just part of the deal. Part of being human in a modern society. But in point of fact, it doesn't matter, right? Because you're not going to change that part of your growing up. In terms of whatever damage has been done to your psyche, it's already done. What happens next is the first existential crisis in your young adulthood. You have tons of questions. I know you do. I did. We all do. How can I go forth into the world and make something of myself? What will my parents think? What will my friends say? How can I afford to live on my own or away from my parents? If I do go to college, what should I even major in? The questions and anxiety builds up. I know this. And all of the pressure you feel boils down to one singular stressor. Just one daunting, looming, and very heavy question. The one that's been haunting you when you try to sleep at night and breaks the silence whenever you're alone with your thoughts. It's like this huge secret that you're so afraid of that you'll keep tucked away deep where you think no one can see behind your eyes. And it slips out when you feel really pushed or frightened. When you've had a bad day or feel like the world is crashing down, that throbbing, sinking, dark feeling comes out. And you've been so afraid to say it out loud to yourself and think no one will get you if you even tell them. Who am I? Go ahead. Say it now. Who am I? It's scary to think about and even scarier to say it, isn't it? Who am I? What am I even doing? I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't even know what I want to do. Now breathe. Breathe with me. Inhale deeply and then let it all out. I'm here to tell you, you're going to be okay. You will. I promise you. You're going to be okay. You're not alone. At least not in your thinking. That's why I'm here. That's why you're listening and watching. I need you to know that it's totally okay to have these questions. Listen, you're going through an existential crisis, but I need you to keep going. I know you feel like you can't or don't know how to move on with or even live your life because you can't see why you should or how you should. I'm here to help. I was there. I had those feelings, and now I'm sharing with you how I overcame them. So please keep going and keep listening. First of all, let's talk about why you're feeling this. Understand that it's natural, at least in the sense that every young adult goes through this to some varying degree. Remember, you've been told since you were born on how to act, how to be, what to say, how to say it, what to know, what to like, on and on and on. What's happened is you've been shaped into who you are right up into this very minute. You've been shaped by your family, your friends, your clubs or teams, your religious teachings, your schooling, into the person you are right now. And now, the same family, friends, clubs and teams, place or book of worship, and school is telling you, hey, go think for yourself. Go ahead. Go make a living. Go out and conquer the world. But, do it the way we showed you. Do it how we talked about. Make us proud. Show us what you've learned. And all at the same time expecting you to follow some kind of path that they've laid out for you. So let me get this straight. You want me to go be my own person and make my way into the world, but at the same time you want me to do it with your approval? Hey, for some people, that's okay. For some, leaning on their tribe and its teachings is perfectly adaptable and has worked out for them. They seem to be okay, maybe even doing well. Maybe they did get that job that their family or friend hooked them up with, or recommended or groomed them into, and now they're well on their way to taking over the business. Or they went to that university as a legacy and went on to have an amazing career in medicine or law. Good for them. But that's not you. Even when you've been told that that would make you happy, you don't see it. And that's okay. That's why I'm walking you through this. You know, it's an incredible thing to raise someone and to enculturate them with your own set of values and expect them to follow those values with ease and contentment. You took a tiny human from infancy to young adulthood and essentially told them, no, shown them, this is your life. This is how you live because this is how we live. This is what you believe because this is what we believe. This is how life just is because that's just the way we've always done it. And you should be grateful. After all, we gave you life. We supported your existence. Now, go out and do it on your own. I want to say this as an aside that I'm not going to advocate or say that rebelling against your parents or your support system is where I'm going with this. Nor am I even talking about being counterculture and being a social contrarian because you feel misunderstood. You may have already been a rebel or might even be one now, which is totally fine if it gets you out of bed and keeps you going. We've all done it to some degree. Some of us have a more sartorial way of showing it, I think. Even that creative cosmetology can be a phase. And under that heavy black eyeliner and eyeshadow and awesome hairdo and band shirt, you're probably still wrestling with the same thing, though, that we've been talking about. Who am I? Probably the defining moment for me in answering this question came in the form of taking a one-way trip to London. After I started and finished a few semesters of college, I still felt like something was missing. I felt like I wanted to do something big, to get away from my family and my home life, my city even. And to the credit of my community college I attended, I found out about a company that helped me to get a work visa ahead of time. Then I saved some money, sold my junky car, and set off for London, with no intention of returning, mind you. At least not till I figured out some of my own questions. It was very emotional for me. I felt at odds with my parents, especially my dad, and just had this overall restlessness and wanted to do something different. Well, from the time I got on the jet airplane and throughout my short-lived stay, which ended up only being a few months later, I have to say, I found the answers to so many of my questions. It changed my life. And the greatest thing about it was that I found the answers, me. I lived my life according to my choices, and through my hardships and my own decisions, I found out who I was and that I was capable of so much more than I gave myself credit for. It's a hell of a thing to get a one-way ticket for a land you've never been to. Honestly, I had no ideas about when I'd come back, and seriously, if I'd come back. Yes, I had a work visa that would last me a short while, but the swirling thoughts and grandiose feelings I had at that time had me considering becoming an expatriate and just finding a new life overseas, whatever the cost. All I had to do was go and find an office address where I could look at index cards which featured job postings and places to rent. Nobody met me at the airport. Nobody showed me how to get to my hostel, which consequently was forever away from the airport where I landed with my ginormous backpack, completely and utterly overstuffed with way too much stuff. Seriously. I think they waited at the airport before boarding because I couldn't take it on board. It might have been 120 pounds with straps to go on my back. I'm telling you, I was hauling it around like I was a walking letter L, all bent over and sweaty. No joke. Well, what do you pack for a trip where you might need one of everything? I mean, I had more than that. I didn't even realize it till way down the line that I had way too much stuff. But right there is where we can pause and think. The whole idea of this trip was based on a highly inspirational and motivational quote I had read somewhere. I can't remember who said it, or I'd give them credit, but it goes something like this. Only when you remove yourself from all things familiar do you truly find out who you really are. I'll say it again. Only when you remove yourself from all things familiar do you truly find out who you really are. That quote was the ink of blue fire which burned a mental tattoo deep into my psyche. I mean, I was already restless, as you know, but those words were the echoes of my past, present, and future waiting for me to decipher, which I'll elaborate for you now by telling you what it means to me and how going on this trip proved its meaning. Everything, well, it felt like everything, but let's just say a lot of things, too many things to list, I had been raised to understand, now had to be seriously retaught while overseas, be retaught by me. Basic things. You can laugh if you want, but it was all new to me. Different words for common things like articles of clothing or groceries, like walking and driving on the opposite side of the street, handling money and coins which were heavier and bigger and had different denominations than I'm used to. Oh, and what was even the value of that money compared to the dollars I had to exchange? I say again, you can laugh, but there's so many basic everyday things we do and just don't think about. Suddenly, the small things in life became time-consuming, frustrating tasks. And I was asking for things and listening for responses from people who had very thick accents and spoke in colloquial phrases that went right over my head. I mean, there was a time I was doing laundry at a laundromat and shouted over the very noisy machines where at least half a dozen other people, locals, were also tending to their laundry. I was shouting to the employee who worked there and he said, "Hey, what setting do you recommend for really dirty pants?" This seemingly innocuous plea for assistance immediately garnered both uncomfortable laughs and evil stare-downs alike, because I didn't realize what I was saying. What I was saying was the equivalent of, "Hey, how do you get stains out of my underwear?" And all I was asking was, how do you get dried mud out of your jeans? Imagine your most basic level of communication being slowed down and tripped over, and meanwhile, the locals are looking at you funny. Everyone I knew was gone. I had no one to rely on, no familiar face to greet me or say hello or wish me good day or remind me of something I needed to do, or even tell me something funny to ease my anxiety. I was no longer a son. I was no longer a brother, a friend, a sibling, a funny coworker, teammate, or even a cousin. I was no longer seen as a familiar face, instantly recognized by my family and those closest to me. I wasn't even the neighbor who took out the trash on Thursday nights for Friday mornings who was waved to by the nice family across the street. I was nobody. I was nobody in a veritable sea of strangers. I mean, people spoke English, of course, but it was very different, sometimes unrecognizable. I was soon reminded by some of the more forthright locals that I myself didn't speak English. I spoke American. That was my introduction. But you know what? All of it was humbling. It's what I needed. Even more than I could have imagined or wanted. It was precisely what I needed. From the 12-hour non-stop flight to the airport, through the long subway ride with a couple of station changes mixed in, I still had to find my hostel. I finally emerged from the depths of the underground, sweaty, utterly out of breath, and shoulders bashed to a strawberry pulp from the weight of my backpack. I couldn't even understand the street directions in my hand. I hadn't slept a wink from the night before I left. I remember that night. I was sweating with chills and tossed all night until it was time to get up and go to the airport. I just had too much on my mind. So now it's summertime. Humidity is high and the temperature's rising along with my anxiety. I'm standing on the sidewalk of a very large boulevard and I didn't even know which way was north or east. Cars are blaring past me in what seems like the wrong side of the road. Thick black diesel exhaust filled my gasping lungs. When I went to blow my nose, black dust would line the tissue. I'm not even exaggerating. So the directions told me to take the north exit, then head east. I couldn't even find street signs anywhere. It took me a long, hard look to realize that all of the street signs are metal squares posted on the corners of the buildings, not the green rectangles we all see hanging on light posts over the intersections in the States. And my first street intersection, which needed to be deciphered and traversed according to the directions, said the second street from the right. Well, and this is all true. The intersection was the first I'd ever seen in my entire life of this size and configuration. It was a 5-way intersection, but then leading into 2 or 3 major roadways. Okay, just try to imagine a tree trunk with 2 joined trunks, both with branches sticking out in all directions. I was standing at the trunk, I don't even know which trunk, trying to figure out which of the limbs I was supposed to cross and then go right. Here's my second humbling moment. It occurred to me that I was mentally and physically exhausted from just trying to decode the map that would lead to the treasure that would hopefully be a reserved bed and shower if I could just follow the directions to the fabled X that marks the spot. So exhausted that it either played on my sense of directions, which isn't great anyway on a good day, or at minimum prevented me from asking for directions. I was very aware of my physical self, sweaty, dirty from traveling on the subways and city streets, totally dehydrated, some odd-looking stranger, a foreigner in a foreign land. Hey, if I saw me at the time, I might have kept my distance. If I saw that me now as an adult, I would have easily offered assistance to said stranded traveler, because now I know what it's like to be that person. That's where the humility that I have now comes from. There he was, posted lonely on the hot sidewalk, that sweaty mess of a broken figure huddled over a scrap of paper in his hands, the veritable weight of the world digging deep into his shoulders, and the massive gravity pulling ever downward. Just trying to get where he was going, the best he could with no help. That's all he knew. That's all I knew. I was operating on all the assumptions I had made about who I was and what I was. But where did these assumptions come from? Why was I so afraid to ask for help? Why didn't I buy more bottled water instead of just the one I had gotten earlier, guzzling it down like it was my last, wishing I had more, when I could have easily paid for another or maybe found somewhere to fill up the empty container? Why was I so self-conscious of my appearance and place so much disdain and vanity on such a natural thing as being sweaty in the summer heat? All of these assumptions are actually called values. These are the things I was encultured with and then internalized as my own values, when in point of fact, these were not my values. These were the things I was taught. All of these things were learned habits which became principled values in my life. They were either witnessed countless times growing up or specifically verbalized by someone close to me as how to live your life, or moreover, how to live my life. You see, men don't ask for directions. They're supposed to protect and lead and be in charge. We don't pay for water in this household. The very idea that you would pay for bottled water is ludicrous. It's insane. How can you waste your hard-earned money on something that's free from a faucet? Sweating is unattractive. It makes you smell and repulses people around you, especially people you want to impress. Your sweat makes you look disheveled and unkempt and therefore inadequate. No one wants to be around you. Are you getting the picture? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? The reason you don't know who you are is because you've been told who you are your entire life. And now you're realizing through a single event that happened to you which shook you to the core, or some kind of slow burn that itches everything you touch, that you're waking up to some serious confusion about your identity. And what I'm suggesting, and what I will continue to speak on, is the fact that the best way you can find out who you really are is to remove yourself from all things and people familiar. When you strip away all of your roles and titles, son, daughter, child, sibling, friend, cousin, coworker, teammate, on and on and on, when you take away who people see you as, you are left with one inexorable, undeniable conclusion. You are whatever and whoever you think you are. Just imagine this now. For every person that you know or who knows you and has interacted with you, from your longtime family and friends to even someone who passes you on the street, all of those people have their own ideas about you. There is a different version of you that exists in the minds of every one of those people. Think about that. Really think about that. There is a different version of you that exists in the minds of every person you've ever known or encountered. This is why it's so critical you find out who you are for your sake, for your own peace of mind, not for theirs. You are the one who lives in your head with your own thoughts. You are the only person in the world who has the right to inhabit your own mind. And yet, you have all of these other people coming and going, some of them even living rent-free in the abyss of your endless, relentless thoughts. How do you find out who you are? You do this by finding out what you value. What gets you out of bed? I'm going to offer you up an exercise that you need to take seriously. I want you to either get a pen and paper or use your phone or computer, whichever is easiest, and make 2 columns, or just separate your writings into 2 parts. This exercise absolutely changed my life, and I know it will help you tremendously. You just need to do it, and it needs to be private. It's not for anyone's eyes but your own. You don't share this with your bestie or your favorite cousin or anyone. Write this down for one part. Things I've been told to value. And on the other part, write down things I value. This is deeply personal, so please don't share it with anyone. I'm going to give you an example of both. So, for the things you've been told to value, write down anything, and I mean anything and everything that your personal tribe, and by that I mean your family, friends, religion, so forth, the people in your life who've influenced you, write down things you've been told, like the things I just mentioned for myself. Sweating is unattractive. You should never pay for bottled water. You should never wear mismatched socks, and so on. There should be plenty to write down, and don't worry about listing it in order of importance or some kind of hierarchy of big or small. Just any and all things which come to mind. Now, do the same for the second part, the things I value list. This list is of tremendous importance because these are the things that get you out of bed. I'm serious. These are the things that when nothing seems to matter, actually do matter to you a lot. When you feel depressed or when you feel happy, these are the things that keep you afloat. What you'll find is that these things will start to clash with the other list. Some of them will outright feel embarrassing because you've been too afraid to be honest with yourself. Again, it can be simple things like, I like scary movies, or even more intangible things like, I like petting dogs. Do you see why some of them are clashing with the other list? Let's use the dogs as an example. You may have grown up without dogs. Maybe your parents or guardians insisted that they need too much attention, have to be housebroke, need to be walked, have to get shots, run away if not properly gated or leashed, their food costs too much, on and on and on. But what if your whole life, or even recently, you've discovered how rewarding it is to pet them and play with them, maybe even specifically a certain breed or size which you're attracted to? Maybe you house sat for a friend and found that feeding them and caring for them really soothes you and calms you and puts you in a better mood. Yes, it's a lot of responsibility, you've told your family before, but I want one. Well, now it's time to consider bringing that value, that thing, whether it's a dog or a change in lifestyle or habit or whatever you've written down, It's time to think about bringing those values into your life, because it's yours to live. If you find that you're afraid of consequences of what your tribe will think, then we need to talk some more, and I'm going to help you with that in other videos. But for now, what I really want you to do, and what I really want you to consider, is really put your honest thoughts into it. It's not why you value the things you do, or even try to justify why you value these things, but just to be honest with yourself and write down what you value and add to your list as you see fit. But then take a step back and reflect on your values. Really think about one of the things that you value that's missing from your life right now. What's missing? We'll use a really simple one from earlier. I like scary movies. Let's say you've never been allowed to watch scary movies growing up. They're bad for you, they're too graphic, the messages and images are against your religion, you'll have nightmares, only dumb people watch scary movies, whatever it is that you've heard. And then imagine the time that you did see one and really liked it. It was life-changing, right? It woke up some of your senses and stirred your imagination. Maybe you want to write scary stories yourself or draw fantastical images. In other words, you found something you liked, but you were told it's not good for you. Now you've developed a pattern, an automatic response to scary movies, where you're now associating all things you were told, their values, and have assimilated them into your own. But you had an awesome and very relevant experience where you saw one and it informed you about a new angle on life, or storytelling, or imagery, or something you couldn't have imagined before. Are you wrong for liking that experience? No. Did it harm you? No. Do you feel like you betrayed your tribe? Maybe. Maybe yes. So you've avoided it. So then how do you go through life knowing anything at all if you haven't experienced it for yourself? How do you get through life at all if you haven't experienced it for yourself? I'm not talking about dangerous or illicit activities like taking hard drugs or doing stupid and dangerous stunts at the risk of your physical health. I'm just talking about all the things you grew up with that you've been avoiding out of fear for disappointing your tribe. I'm talking about all of your secret passions, and your silly ones too, which bring you simple joy and just don't hurt anyone. I'm even talking about the huge misconceptions and ignorant ways you've been living through no fault of your own, which have now cost you your sanity and keep you up at night. This clash of values is what I believe brought you to the point of asking yourself that dreaded question: who am I? So, after pacing the hard sidewalks in the unrelenting heat and with a lot of trial and error, and yes, even asking someone for brief directions, I finally found my hostel. I know I looked like a hot mess when I arrived at the counter, but I didn't even care at that point. I was just happy to finally be where I needed to be. And then something seemingly simple and small happened, which again gives me pause to point out. The nice young lady at the counter could see that I was out of breath and probably out of my depth, showing up with what looked like a whole other person strapped to my aching back. I'm sure that my sweat-soaked shirt and voice crackling with dryness gave away my level of exhaustion. No hiding that. She offered me a cold bottle of water. Not just any bottle, but the one she had just purchased for herself, as she noted while handing it to me. I was stunned and refused, of course. She insisted that I take it and conveyed it through her warm smile and friendly eyes. "Please," she said. I'm not gonna lie, I gulped it down with the enthusiasm and fervor that could only be described as desperate, as if reaching for a tube of oxygen underwater on my last bit of breath, as if my entire life depended on it. Looking back, I think it did. You know, it wasn't nearly enough to satisfy any proper form of hydration, and I'd soon find more in the faucet in the room I was headed to, but it saved me. She saved me. Along with a key and a cheerful welcome, she sent me on my way. After I profusely thanked her, of course. I would later repay her with her own drink in return, let the record show. Flash forward to that night, I was still alone. The bed I was staying in was one of 3 bunk beds, enough for 6 total sleepers. No one else showed up that night. I had the whole room to myself. I took a bottom bunk and stared listlessly into the springs and mattress just over my head. I cried. I tried to keep it soft. I didn't want anyone to hear me. How strange to be in such a liminal space. What a lonely night. To be a world away from everything and everyone I knew. And a thought became louder and louder in my head until it burst through my quivering lips. I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. Eventually, I must have cried myself to sleep because the next thing I knew, the morning sunlight was coming through the window. The world hadn't ended. I was told about culture shock before I left the States, the idea that going to a foreign land or encountering a foreign idea would put you into a state of shock, as if nothing seems familiar. I'm reminded of something the author Robert Louis Stevenson said. There are no foreign lands. It is the traveler only who is foreign. But it wasn't just that. It was the idea that I was still alone and would be until I did something about it. This was my next lesson in humility. Who do you become when you have no one to impress? Who do you present yourself as when meeting a perfect stranger? Who are you? Why did I word it that way? The first question. Who do you become when you have no one to impress? Something you may struggle with is this idea that it's hard for you to meet people. The biggest question I would ask myself, and even suffered from, like so many others, is, I wonder if they'll like me. That question is so loaded down with all of the wrong intentions, it hurts me to even think that's how I used to think. Remember, I'm here to help you, and in order to bring up your esteem, you're going to have to adopt new ways of thinking about yourself. One of the most often asked questions that inevitably comes up when two adults meet for the very first time is, what do you do? Or something along those lines. People want to know what you do for money. How do you support yourself financially is what they're really asking, and further, they want to know if what you do is worthy of their attention and company. As youngsters, though, what's the most often asked question by people not living in your household? What do you want to be when you grow up? Remember that? You might even be cringing right now just hearing those words. How are you supposed to answer that? You probably gave a different answer every single school year, or when you did give an answer, I bet you it was something you thought the adults asking would want to hear. Like, I'm going to follow in the family tradition, or you would rattle off whatever would make them proud. And now look at you. If you're laughing, it's totally okay. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. Well, what about this for an answer? When I grow up, I want to be free in my thinking. I want to be honest with my emotions. I want to have purpose with my actions. I want to have confidence that I will be okay with whatever the consequences are of my own actions. That's where I want you to be, and I know you can get there. See, what I've discovered through my own existence and experiences is that for me anyway, and I suspect for you too, it's far more important that I be content with who I am and that the what I am makes no difference. In fact, it doesn't make a difference to me what anyone is. And this is what we need to relearn and reprogram ourselves. We are putting value on someone else based on the wrong ideal. I mean to say, if someone asked you right now, what do you do? And your answer is, I work at a fast food restaurant. What could they glean from that? What does that say about you? Of course, many assumptions will pop up. Oh, they have no education. Oh, they have no aspirations to do anything with their life. Oh, that's a job for students. But is that really your whole story? Of course it isn't. Everyone in life is exactly where they either need to be or want to be. But life is also very dynamic. It flows and changes constantly. But imagine you are working in a fast food place, and maybe you are at this very chapter in your life. What's wrong with that? Anyone who works for a living deserves dignity. Yes, all people deserve dignity. But I'm talking about you or your friends or someone you know who has worked fast food or some other job that's entry level. Do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. I'm reminded of the information I found out about my ancestors who came to the States, as well as the ones who were already here before this country was given a name by the European explorers. I imagine all of the hardships they endured just to not die. I mean, think about it. All of the things your ancestors did on the daily with no electricity or internet or cars or even smartphones. Some of you who are really bitter, salty, cynical, or otherwise mad at your current state of living might be saying, well, good for them, they struggled, so am I. I didn't ask to be born, I didn't ask for this misery. Listen, take a deep breath, inhale, and then slowly exhale. Now listen to this. Welcome to your life. You're right. Everything that happened before you was out of your control. But everything as of right now, as of this very instant, is within your control. You've got to stop worrying about these labels about what you are and concentrate on who you are. You are not a uniform and a name tag. You are not a cashier or fry cook. You are not simply a son or daughter or sibling or coworker or cousin. You are a unique person with a unique perspective in this world. You are you, and no one else can make that claim. And that should make you smile. Remember that. Even when you feel down or hopeless, like life will just always be the same or will never change. I know that feeling all too well. Well, I need to tell you something. If you're feeling worthless or hopeless or depressed, it's because you've given in to all of that nonsense around you. You've given up hope that you can be content with yourself. Your subconscious mind has been browbeaten into submission and fed massive barrels of lies. So how do you beat back? How do you take control of your life? I'm giving you the answer. It's what we've been talking about and will continue to talk about throughout these videos. You've got to figure out who you are by asking yourself what it is that you value. Your values are what make your life worth living. If you can't remember swinging on a swing, can you at least remember or imagine looking at another child swinging? Can you see the ear-to-ear grin? Can you hear the laughter? That is the look and the sound of joy. And I know what you're thinking, which is why I'm so cleverly going to answer you. Yeah, that's because they don't know what real life is. They don't know what it's like. That's because they don't know about all the wars and crime and injustice going on in the world. That's because they haven't learned yet how hard it is to be an adult. Well, you're right about one thing. They are innocent to the complexities and harsh realities around them, yes. But what they are masters of, and you were too at one point, is just being in the moment. This is the other way I'm going to help you think about who you are, by just being in the moment. So, now that you've written down what your values are, or what you like, or what gets you out of bed, and if you haven't done it yet, keep following along the way, it will make sense. I want you to find some time by yourself to meditate on just one thing that you enjoy doing. I don't care if it's as simple as sitting at the park and people watching while listening to your music on headphones. I want you to discover that when you find something you like or enjoy, notice how quickly the clock moves. Notice how fast time goes by. Do you remember being a little kid and how the days just seem to go on forever and ever? The passing of time is a constant, but when you are in the moment, time ceases to exist. I'm going to share with you a beautiful moment in time for me where time ceased to exist, and all that there was me and the silent night. I had just finished a 16-hour shift at my job in London. Yes, you heard me correct. I worked a double shift. I had very little to eat that day and survived mostly on free espresso and only one decent hot meal way earlier in that day. I was making my way to the bus terminal to catch a bus since the subway, or tube as they call it, was now closed. It was late, probably closer to 1 or 2 in the morning. A few of us late-night stragglers were mingling in the cold, wet parking lot as the buses slowly but surely picked up the eager to go home. My bus finally arrived, and I realized as I pulled out my weekly transportation pass, oh no, it had expired. I tried to hide it on my face as I attempted to board the bus, but my poker face was just no good, and the driver called me out. I remember he smiled like the Grinch when he saw it and promptly and very aggressively told me to get off. I pleaded for a moment, but when he heard my American accent, that really fueled his cruelty. The bus drove off without me. I was the only one left in the cold and dark. I felt so alone. Why is this happening to me, I thought. Why on all nights, after I worked a double? My legs and feet are screaming at me in pain. My spine is tense and compressed. My stomach is growling. And more importantly, much more importantly, I actually have no idea how to get home. I have no money, none, not even a credit card. This was all before smartphones, and it didn't even matter because I didn't even have so much as a cell phone. What good would it do? I didn't know anybody. I genuinely didn't know how to get home, and all I knew was that my routine was to walk a few blocks from my flat to the local underground station, get on the correct line and ride it to work, and then the reverse to go home. I had no idea where or what direction I was ever traveling on while literally underground. I didn't know any streets on the actual street level or even any landmarks. Listen, I was only there for a few weeks, and it just never occurred to me to walk to work or ride a bus in the daytime. The tube was just too convenient. Besides, it was almost 4 miles. For someone from the States, walking that far was just not something I did. You can laugh at me if you think that's not far, but with the perfect storm that I just described, it might as well have been walking to another city. I felt so much self-pity. I felt angry, still seething at the bus driver for not giving me a break. I felt sad that I didn't have any money or friends who could help. I was mentally, emotionally, and physically drained, like nothing left in me. What was I to do? I looked around at my surroundings. I took in some breaths of cold air, and something welled inside me. At that moment, I made up my mind. This is where I want you to really pay attention, because this story illustrates something which is probably more valuable than anything I can share with you. I asked myself, is this it? Am I just going to lay down and die? I know it seems dramatic, but I know you can relate, those of you laughing. But seriously, what were my options? Do I just lie down on a bench and freeze until the morning? Until what? I still didn't have any money on me. I knew at home I had a bit of cash somewhere, but more importantly, I knew I had a warm bed, a hot shower, and at least something to heat up and eat. I willed myself to go home. I turned my anger, self-loathing, fear, doubt, sadness, mistrust, loneliness into my own personal triumph. I remembered that I had had a copy of the London street map in a small book called London A to Z in my backpack. I remember having my music and my headphones with me, so I put on some instrumental music. As I moved in the direction of my ultimate destination, my negative emotions began to slough off like I was shedding my skin. The muscle soreness in my feet and legs began to numb. The briskness of my pace beat out the cold. I stopped feeling the pain all up and down my back. The rain clouds sort of dissipated at times, enough for me to look at the pale yellow moon above me. My grimace relaxed into a grin. As I walked past the brick apartment buildings, I began to take notice of the sparse, uncovered windows that I still had lights on in the room, and wondered, who lived there, and what were they doing up so late? I noticed the gilded gates with ornate pointed fence posts that sometimes met me at the sidewalk. I could see the intricacy of the old tree roots which threatened to burst through the sidewalk at times, and the long branches that reached to the sky on trees which were probably planted there 100 years ago. A fluttering bat in the distance, an occasional taxi, the movement of the clouds and the shapes that looked like familiar forms. I stopped a number of times, of course, to get my bearings at various intersections. Remember, the street names change even though the street continues on, and the intersections can be tricky with their myriad offshoots. But every time I looked around me, not another soul was to be seen. It's as if the old city sidewalks were made just for me. In a city where literally millions of people call home, somehow the night belonged to me. Alone, but not afraid. You see, it was my will. I willed myself the strength to go home. The world of nonfiction, both as written word and as visual media, is full of inspiration. There are countless stories of people overcoming certain odds. I am not comparing myself to those who have literally had to will themselves to survive a horrible, terrible, life-threatening event. That's not what I'm here to do. In fact, my story is not unique, but it's mine. Instead, I think of it as a bookmark, a place in my story where I was humbled as a young man, at a time when I first wished I could just be a boy and have someone to hold my hand, at a place where I wanted so desperately to hear someone I know say my name and just tell me everything would be okay. At a juncture in my life where I hoped to take the easy way out, that maybe someone would just come and rescue me. This may seem silly to you, but the skin I was shedding was that of my childhood. It is so important, critical, that you as a young person have your moment or moments of being humbled, of realizing that sometimes you only matter to you. Sometimes you will feel alone. Sometimes everything will seem wrong or like the world is out to get you. It's not, and you're not alone. You do matter. And just as you have willed yourself to go through today, I want you to go through tomorrow and the next. Because life is just a series of events. The things that seem so important to you will be replaced by other things. You will lose and gain friendships as well as certain loves of your life. The thing that matters most is that you remember that it's all part of the deal. Fairness is an illusion. Everyone walks around with their own silent memories of love and loss. Everything is in motion. Nothing is static. People, including you, will age. Hopefully, you look back on your younger self and see that you went from being afraid of the dark to embracing it. See, the night I walked home was a much-needed moment of humbling. The choice to not lay down and give up was mine. The pain of my senses, my body, was temporary. Your body does what your mind tells it to, not the other way around. For me, and I want this for you too, is to not give up when things seem difficult. Me going alone to London was my rite of passage. There were many days and nights of difficulty, but also tremendous growth. And the only way for me to experience this was to have removed myself from all things and people familiar, to learn self-reliance, to take whatever lessons and experiences I grew up with and mesh them into my own, to learn that the tribe did their best to raise me with all of the knowledge that they had at that time. And that's okay. To learn to do the best you can with what you have, to not give up, and to will yourself to do it all over again the next day. I thought I went to London to find myself. I didn't know it would be about losing myself. I lost the petulant child who demanded that everything be handed to him and expect everyone else to take care of him. I found the young man who would go on to have many more adventures, sometimes solo, sometimes with a friend or two. Throughout history, there have been and still are societies which have their youth go on rites of passage. Sometimes it's a quest or a hunt. Sometimes it's a walkabout, living in the wilderness alone and surviving. Think of it as you being raised in a nest. The nest is all you've known since birth, and now you are being pushed out of the nest to test your flight. You're either going to flap your wings and fly, or you won't. As much as we want to be coddled and handed things, we have to grow up. You may be at a time in your life, maybe even right now, where you feel this difficult to describe energy, this angst, this yearning for something more in your life. Don't fight it. Embrace it and do something about it. Take a road trip. Go camping for a long weekend. Get on a plane or train to somewhere distant. Do the thing you're so afraid to do. Some of the members of your tribe will disapprove. Others will silently nod. Still, others may encourage you, as I am now. I know you desperately want to answer that burning question, who am I? Remember, the key for optimal growth in this experience is to do something on your own, away from your tribe, your social circle, and your everyday influences. Listen, every excuse you have is fear in disguise. This is true of anything you want to accomplish. I say again, there are too many awesome examples of people doing things that have inspired you. Be inspired. You know, I'm reminded of my own ancestry. My ethnic heritage ranges from parts of Europe and pre-Columbian America to even parts of Africa. There's so much history. Every one of those people, every one of them, not just my parents, but their parents and all the way back lived a life. They all had a story, and so much of it was struggle. So much of it was struggling to make it to the next day, dealing with disease, poverty, war, forced migration. You have no good reason to be bored in your life. There are too many things to learn about and experience. Your mind is a wellspring of infinite creativity. Listen, if you're at a job you hate and wish you could be at a job you don't hate, work towards something better. Work on yourself. It's not the job you hate. It's you who you don't love enough. I'll say it differently. You don't hate your circumstances. You just don't love yourself enough to change or accept that where you are is just part of your own hardship that you have the choice to move through and break free of. I encourage you to not play the victim of your story. I say again, there are simply countless examples of people from all walks of life who overcame tremendous adversity and went on to live happy, successful lives. Their stories are everywhere. Listen, you can get through school. If you find it too much, then get into independent studies like I did. If you dropped out, get your GED and learn a skill. There's nobility in work. But having a job you hate is also humbling. That's an experience you will be glad you had because it shows you how things could be if you don't change. Remember, everyone is exactly where they want to be or need to be, otherwise working on something else. Everyone makes their own decisions, however good or bad, and lives with their consequences. This is just simply the nature of the journey. It's the learning from your experiences that will set you apart from any misery and ignorance that plagues you. Otherwise, you are doomed to live a life of said torment. I will help you in other videos on the topic of learning to be introspective. So maybe you're just passing through at the fast food place or other entry-level job that you have. Someone else needs that extra income. Still, someone else decided that's all they need. I'll remind you there is dignity in all forms of work. But if you're young and new to the working world, just know that every job you get will be broken down into only one of two categories with no exceptions. Either you work for someone else's dream or you work for your own. And you're either good with that and roll with it and see where it takes you, or you jump tracks and forge your own path. And again, see where it takes you. The reason it took me so long, 10 years, to get my 4-year degree is because I struggled with my fears and doubts for most of that time. Fear and doubt probably played the biggest role. Well, listen, you're not alone. I jumped tracks more times than I care to count. And to be fair, I'm a fan of learning things, so there was a lot of trial and error and of taking classes and still others. But like you, I was just trying to figure it out. I was and continue to fight my own personal afflictions along the way. I know plenty of people who went on to 4-year universities, graduated, went on to a grad school, and now have seemingly excellent careers. Not all of them are happy. I can say the same for those I've known who didn't go to any college, but instead took over the family business. Not all of them are happy. I've known people who have tried a vocation, still another and another and another, and still haven't landed where they want to. Do you see the pattern? I knew before I even graduated high school that I did not want to simply fall in line and do whatever was the next step expected of me. That just seemed too predictable, too plain even for my taste. I value my creativity over certainty, and that's the path I chose. And I am happy, because I chose the path, because I was honest with myself. I'll talk about the importance of honesty, trust, and respect for yourself in another video. So, what's your point about taking forever to get a degree, you're asking? My point is that there is no correct next step for you. Maybe you've been pressured by your tribe or society at large to go one way or another, and neither of those paths interest you. There is no path laid out for you that you can't change. There is nothing you can't do or that anywhere your imagination won't take you if you just follow your heart. Listen, if you lived in what's called the first world, especially the United States, you have no excuse not to explore and be curious. Your ancestors never had the opportunities you have right now, including millions of people who currently live in other oppressive nations who wish they had what you have. Find out who you are, then figure out what you want to do. And keep in mind that the point you're aiming for, that destination that you're driving toward, is not going to be a straight line. It will curve and meander like a long, windy river. It may take you years to get where you want to go. So enjoy the journey. Listen, life is hard. It's the shortest, longest, strangest thing you will ever know. And now that I have my degree, it's become more symbolic than anything. It's a symbol of discipline and of will. It's a reminder of all the fascinating people I've met during that time, who all have their own backstories and places they still want to go. It's a statement to myself, a reminder of all the classes I took and retook because of having such poor focus, fear, and doubt, and yet still endless curiosity. And I still got through all of it. It just took me longer. It's a series of chapters in my life that were full of ups and downs and fantastic lessons along the way. I took off entire years and semesters to seek out other ideas, and I tried and failed many, many times. All I can say is that you have to know yourself before you can know what you want to do. You do have the excuse of being young, and that excuse also gives you opportunity. You have time on your side. A lot of people are going to ask you, or have asked you already, what do you want to do? It's absurd that you would or could know what you want to do when you don't even know who you are. And maybe you're going to hem and haw and stutter and want to slink away. Hey, it's okay to not have the answer. You have your whole life ahead of you. Move away and go off to a 4-year university if that's your plan, or local community college and see what's there. Help your family business if that's what you feel is your path. Explore vocational and trade schools. Join the Peace Corps or other organizations that get you out of your comfort zone. But most importantly, find yourself so you can lose yourself. Find out what you really like. If you're curious about a subject or place or event, do all that you can to quench your curiosity. Remove yourself, however temporary, from all things and people familiar. Be humbled. Find out that you're more capable than you imagined. Do the things that scare you, not because I or someone else says to, but because in your heart there's a secret longing. Don't be afraid to do something for fear that you'll be bad at it or what other people will say. Every person who has ever inspired you through their athletic prowess or musical virtuosity or any other professional who you look at and admire took thousands of hours of practice, literally years, to get where they are. What you're seeing is the result of their will, their focus, their dedication, and their love of what they do. Remember, who you are is the collection of self-descriptors and things that you like and value. not what you do for money or to support yourself. I'll say it differently. You are a part of your tribe. You may like it or you may not. You may have a few tribes which call you their own. But the way they see you and the way you see yourself is changing. If we stripped away all of your appellations and connections like son, daughter, sibling, cousin, employee, coworker, on and on and on, what are you left with? How would you describe yourself to a perfect stranger without using those relationships? Think about it. And so, for now, I'll leave you with this. What is the one thing I would tell my younger self if I could? I would say, keep going. I believe in you. And so, dear friend, I say to you, with great sincerity and deep humility, keep going. I believe in you.